Alright guys, welcome back to VALORANT News. The playoffs have officially concluded around the world. The 16 teams and their seeds have been determined into the World Championship, and that means one thing: the bracket draw happened last night as well. The group stages are set going into the big one. Is there a group of death? And if there is, which group is that going to be? These brackets, though, are going to get pretty intense in the GSL-style matches that are to come in a couple of weeks' time in Paris. Who do you think is going to win the tournament in the comment section below based on these groups? And what are the key storylines to keep an eye on? Very much enjoy your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. I would greatly appreciate it. Plenty to get into today. Just quickly starting here, the replay system, after years of speculation and discussion, is finally set to arrive here in September. So we'll see if that's going to work, if it's going to be any good, and really what the community thinks about it after, of course, asking for it for quite some time. Now, just to quickly mention this, the Paper X guys, they walk away with the championship, right? Congratulations to them. I think it was really cool to see the championship out in Tokyo, despite some of the criticisms and concerns, including from myself. It was pretty spectacular to witness, to see, how the tournament went on. Now, as we can see here, Jing, just wanted to mention this because he's got this wrist cast still on, and people are like, oh, well, has he injured his wrist or something? The answer is yes, he has. I don't know if you guys remember this, but I think it was in Toronto, maybe, after that tournament. His mother said how Jing had, taken a suitcase. I'm not exactly sure where he was moving the suitcase from or to. Maybe it was from the conveyor belt or whatever when you're picking up the luggage. But anyway, yanked this suitcase somewhere and he somehow injured his wrist. So it's not like a gaming-related injury, which is good news, I guess, because, players can suffer with carpal tunnel and stuff like this. So thankfully it's not that, but it is a little concerning to see that Jing's still suffering with this to some degree. Maybe just because he's in an airport, he's decided that he's going to be, let's say, more careful in future with how he handles things. But he won the MVP, and he won his gold. I mean, I saw this yesterday, and I wasn't really sure exactly what it was meant to be for, but this is apparently a golden keyboard, 24 karat gold. So I'm not sure if it's gold plated, but if it's 24 carats, maybe, it can't be pure gold. That would be insanely heavy. Anyway, this is something's reward, so congratulations to him and for that team. Maybe they got to do that around the rest of the world as well. But two grand finals happened yesterday that we didn't cover yesterday morning, and that was Liquid against Gen.G, and then of course G2 versus NRG. Pretty much all of these grand finals around the world were particularly crushing, right? There weren't really many great series here, and Gen.G went down. They tried, but Nats and the boys were too strong, and Team Liquid, they turn up after an up and down season for sure, but they finished the year as a very compelling threat. They win the Bind 13-10, they win the Lotus 13-9, they win the Sunset 13-10. Gen.G gave it a good go, and Ara had a difficult final map of the series, but it wasn't good enough in the end. So Liquid get the job done. They're your champions in Europe, and the champions in North America and the Americas goes again to a familiar face in G2 esports, right? Now, there was some good little trash talk going down here, calling out Ethan, saying, keep running it down mid. You can't call, you guys don't know what you're talking about. And this is pretty spicy. And, and Tag realized that Jonah was then mocking Som in this other thing was pretty funny as well. So there were some good moments with the finals last night, and NRG, they put up a good fight, but it wasn't good enough in the end. These are your images for the champions of the season, the kickoff champions, the stage 1 champions, and the stage 2 champions in the regions around the world. And in the Americas, you've got to say, it has become, we used to say EMEA was a one-team league with Fnatic, but the Americas is a one-team league. G2 won everything there this season, and apart from Sentinels, they didn't lose to anyone. I think G2's record is actually pretty insane. Just before we look at this, I actually did want to have a quick look and we'll discuss everything there. But if you look this season for Sentinels, okay, at EWC, they lost to Billy Gaming, right, and Carmine Core, but they didn't have Leaf there and everything. Masters Toronto, they lost to Fnatic and Paper X. But if you look at the Americas region, even starting from, stage 1, even going back to the Americas kickoff, which of course they won, they haven't lost to anyone else in the Americas. They've lost to Sentinels a couple of times this year, and they've lost internationally, but they've not lost to anyone else this whole season, G2, which is a kind of remarkable feat, and the same thing happened again against NRG last night. This was pretty competitive. NRG gave it a decent go. The bind was 13-11. They'll certainly feel like after a 9-3 half there, this was probably NRG's map to win, and after that it was always going to be a bit of an uphill battle. Ethan's calling was getting criticised by Jonah B for his approach on the attacking side of these maps, and, well, NRG gave it a good go, but in the end it wasn't enough. So, yeah, another 3-0, right? G2 clearly the better team. They lock up the #1 seed for the World Championship. And as Ethan says, like, let the team down today. Abysmal attacking sides, but at least we got a bit of time to prep. And to be fair to NRG, they've been through the blender, right, haven't they, recently? You know, the stress of making sure they were going to take down Cloud9 to make it through, then beating Sentinels in a best-of-5 and then playing G2 in the finals. Not an easy road, and they can't be too frustrated with this because at the end of the day, they achieved their goal of making it to the World Championship. Now, Ethan did say this wasn't even for champ seeding, which I'd be very surprised if it wasn't. I know that G2 have 1 million points, but I'm pretty sure that if they'd have been beaten in the finals here, based on qualifying by making the finals as opposed to qualifying by getting enough points, then NRG would have been the #1 seed. It's kind of impossible to win your own playoffs in Stage 2 and not be the #1 seed for champs, but in the end it didn't really matter because they lost anyway. And they're going to the World Championships potentially with some potential underneath them, but as we've just said, it is a one-team league, the Americas, right now. But internationally, that could be a different story. So, fair play to NRG. They turned it around. They made a bit of a run. And as Babybay says, grateful to be a part of VALORANT history. I was overlooked for years. These guys had confidence that I'd be the right fit at a time where things were very tough. 3-time VCT Americas winners, baby. Job isn't done. Champions Paris next. We will be ready. So, yeah, of course, Leaf came back into the lineup to deliver this great victory for the team. And, you know, Leaf had a solid series, but nothing spectacular necessarily. It was actually kind of remarkable how consistent both teams' individual performances were, but especially G2 with a 45 to 49 kills spread. Kind of remarkable how consistent, let's say, their execution was. And Babybay will be there with their team as part of it anyway in Champions Paris. In an ideal world, he doesn't play, right? And Leaf plays and is well enough to play, and Babybay can be, you know, basically an additional coach for those guys and help them in that sense. So, look, they're obviously going to be a force to be reckoned with come the World Championship. And who are they going to play? Because after all this concluded, it was therefore time for the group draw. All 16 qualified teams drawn based on seeding. No same region teams allowed per group. So that's how it was going to transpire, and that's how things all kicked off. So every group was going to be one team per region, and the seeds would be organised as follows. Win 2 before you lose 2, advance to the playoffs, lose 2 before you win 2, go home early from Paris. So these are the groups, and like, they were drawn, they weren't like, you know, randomized or whatever, and as a result, they're pretty spectacular, I will say. Now, what is the most interesting group? That is a good question. Let's dive into it. We've got to start with Group A, because Group A is pretty deadly on paper, right? Now, I think XLG will have some thoughts on this, because XLG, they need to outplace DRG here at the World Championship, because if they don't, then DRG will make sure that they keep their spot next year, and XLG won't. It is, or potentially will go down to Ascension to have to fight for it, which you don't want to do. I think XLG or DRG, if they do drop down to Ascension, they'll be confident they can win and earn their spot back, but it's not ideal, certainly having not made the World Championship. So XLG and DRG, one of them would really love to get out of their group, but it seems a very much uphill battle for both of those teams potentially, and well, certainly for XLG. Maybe they play Paper X and then potentially Sen or Giant X. So it is quite the group, right? Paper X and Sentinels, of course, will be the favourites to get out, but XLG have been a force from China at times, and Giant X have kind of come out of nowhere to be a potential serious threat as well. Yeah, Giant X got 3-0'd by Liquid, so Sen should be feeling confident, but Group A is still pretty interesting. Now, Group B has probably had the least talk about it, and I think for understandable reasons. Fnatic are in there with RRQ, Billy Gaming in there with MIBR. So I think MIBR should be pretty happy about this, right? Given their recent underperformance, they've actually turned up in a group where I think their chances of getting out are pretty decent. Fnatic almost certainly should, but it's got to be said that they have been struggling lately, and it's not like RRQ are a bad team at all. They beat Talon, they made it to the finals against Paper X, they made it reasonably competitive. Billy Gaming, again, it's just tough to know what the Chinese teams are going to do on an international stage. But that group's actually, the more I think about it, the more interesting it gets, because RRQ Fnatic could be a really tasty first round game, I think. So that's Group B. Group C is what most are looking at as the group of death, and I understand why. Now, if you look at it from a pure name perspective, then yeah, that probably is true. But if you look at it from the perspective of recent form, then maybe it becomes a little bit less clear. But look, Team Liquid, they just won the championship in EMEA. They'll play DRX in the first round. Frankly, DRX lucky to even make it to the World Championship. It could well have been Talon instead, and DRX, they placed top 6 of the playoffs. You know, look, are they going to turn up to champs and get top 6 again? Probably, you know, possibly, I don't know, but it would require them to make it through their group, which is not necessarily going to be easy. NRG have clearly become a serious force in recent weeks, and Edward Gaming, they are in a bit of a struggle right now. It seemed like they found something, but that's not been so clear. So I think if you look at the names on Group C, you'll say, wow, that's an insane group. Only 2 of those teams make it. But on recent form, Edward and DRX have kind of been in a trickier spot, and there's a reason why Liquid and NRG certainly made the finals of their own region when those other guys didn't. And then Group D is actually, I really like Group D. I think this is going to be a very tasty one, because T1, look, G2 should advance, right? But in terms of who's going to make it as the second seed, I mean, look, Heretics should, you'd think, put up a good fight against G2, but Heretics recently, it's been a struggle. Again, they were kind of lucky to even make it to the World Championship at the end after bombing out of the playoffs. So, but, you know, who knows? They could turn it around for the World Championship. T1 have shown so much promise at times, you know, winning all the way back in Bangkok. And then DRG, again, lots to play for there, and one of the strongest teams in the Chinese region. So yeah, I'm excited to see. I think all of these groups are pretty good. I don't think there's like a clear cut, wow, that's an insane group of death, I can't believe it. But I think every group has their favorites and it has their least favorites, and I actually really like the way this is heading going into the World Championship. So intrigued to your thoughts in the comments below on that. There are a couple of storylines, of course, that are worth discussing, one of which is in that Group B, because in Group B, Fnatic are there, as are Billy. We know famously Billy versus NRG. Both of those teams are here at the World Championship this year. They could play each other, but it will require both of those teams to get through the group, which is relatively unlikely. But it is possible that Billy and Fnatic could play one another, and that of course would involve Crashies playing like he did on NRG against Billy as it was at the time, and as, you know, boasted message to Crashies here, just told him BLG made it to champs. Not only that, they're also in the same group as well. So that's going to be exciting if that transpires, but very much intrigued to your thoughts, as always, on all of this stuff in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.